Hey, what's up, everybody? In today's video, I wanted to talk about record trigger flow best practices. Flows can be a very good automation tool when implemented correctly. I do see a lot of enterprise level clients where flows are a major pain point for them. A lot of them don't follow best practices and don't scale to the client's needs. So, hopefully, with this video, we can mitigate some of that and start creating optimal and efficient flows. So let's talk about some key best practices. The first one is one flow per object. There's really two school of thoughts here. One of them is the one flow per object. It's a lot easier to have control over how the flow is going to run, especially if you have logic that has to execute before some other logic. The other school of thought is you can have multiple flow per object, but you really have to have strict entry criteria because you have no control how these flows, in what order these flows will run during the transaction, which could complicate things. There's also a tool called flow orchestration that Salesforce released, and there you could actually set up how these flows will run in what order. But usually we go one flow per object, so that is before save flow on each of the events. So create, update, and delete. The second point is keep flows short and simple. On a lot of projects, I see very long, complex flows. Maybe they didn't start that way, but after several iterations, they are very lengthy, have a lot of loops, and perform very poorly. So before you even kick off a flow, you should decide if flow is the automation tool that best suits your needs. A lot of times, most of the times, if it's pretty complex, Apex is a better tool. The third point I wanted to go over is entry conditions. So we should have pretty strict entry conditions for all of our flows. So they're only running when that entry condition is met. A lot of the issues I see on these projects is they'll have 20, 50, 100 flows per object. And during each transaction, we're going into every single one of these flows, which is really slowing down the process. I'm sure you guys see when you go to save a record and it takes a minute to save. And this is what's happening. The order of execution is Salesforce order execution is executing, and you could take a look what that actually means, but it's like a 26-step process of what runs before save flows, after save flows, triggers, validation rules. There's a lot. So if we can make that execution smaller, just because we're not hitting that entry criteria, it's going to speed up processing time. It's going to save you on your governor limits and so forth. The fourth point I wanted to go over is avoiding hard-coded IDs. Just like Apex, hard-coded IDs are a no-no on flows. IDs change from testing environment to testing environment to production. So even if you hard code an ID in dev, that ID is going to be different in production, right? So your flow will not work. So if you need an ID of a record or a record type, you really need a query for it. Use the get records. You can query the entity object, specify the developer name and object name for a record type, and pull it back. So that is the recommended approach. The next point I wanted to go over is efficient data and DML handling, really minimizing get records, update records, and delete records, trying to combine them as much as you can. One thing that really is a big issue that I've seen is having get records or update records in for loops. So this is against best practices, just like Apex. We can't have a DML statement inside of a loop because during every iteration it is getting called, and it still goes against our limits. So this really slows down the process. I did a video on the transform element to help mitigate this and help mitigate flows, loops in flows, to really speed up the performance. But that is something that you should be very aware of, like no get, update, or delete elements in for loops. And the last point I wanted to go over is air handling. So just like Apex, we should have some kind of air handling mechanism. I usually create a custom object that will track my errors, where they're coming from, the flow, the node, the exception, who was the running user, and so forth. And that way I could check records on that object every morning and see what is breaking, and if it is, go address those issues. There's also several other solutions. There is a managed package and an unmanaged package called Nebula Logger. It gives you very defined logging mechanisms that you could use in Apex and flows with very good errors. So that might be a good option for your use case as well. Okay, so let's now talk about before save versus after save flows. So the purpose of a before save flow is to really just update the triggering record. You shouldn't be sending emails, calling Apex actions, doing any sort of that stuff. You shouldn't be updating related records or anything like that. So as you probably know, a before save flow could be triggered on create, update, or delete. And we have to make sure there's no actual DML, so no updates or creates in our before save flow, just because this runs before the record is committed to the database. So if you have a create or an update, you could be in a recursive loop where you're updating, so you're starting that transaction over again and over again and over again. So we'll show this in our little demo. You can use assign variables to assign values, and once that record is saved, the record is updated. Another good use case for before save flows are custom error validations. So if you look at that order of execution, uh, before save flows actually run first in that order. So it's nice to have those errors there because no other processes are running and have to be rolled back and so forth. So on the other hand, what are after save flows used for? So after save flows are used to update related records, send emails, call Apex actions, um, and you can call subflows. So if you have repeating logic in a lot of your flows, you could create subflows, and from decision nodes, you could call those subflows. So let's move on to the demo. So I have three flows here. So I have a before save flow, an after save flow, and a subflow. So let's start reviewing these. So in my before save flow, I have a flow that fires on account. It's set to fast field updates, which means before save. So if I had action and related records, that would mean after save. And this flow is running on create and update with no entry criteria. So you might wonder why I'm running this on create and update. Usually I configure most of my flows like that. And then I have a formula variable called onCreate. And this is just telling me if it's new, right? So if onCreate equals false, we know we are updating the record. So this is a good way to have all your flows run on create and update. And if you need something to just run on create or just update, you could use a variable like this. So I have a decision that's saying, hey, if we are updating this and the rating is hot or warm, this account and and the active is it does not equal yes. So we are updating, the rating is hot or warm, and active is not yes. So in other words, it's null or no. Then we want to update the active to yes. So here I just grab an assignment variable. I select what fields I want to set. So on my triggering account, the active field equals yes. When the record saves, that will get updated. I also have a custom error validation here that's saying when we're updating the record and industry is being changed and our open opportunity count is greater than 0, then throw this custom error. So we will show this in 1 second, but first let's take a look at the after save flow because they're kind of related. So same thing here. I have the after save flow that runs on account, no entry condition, but I do have my onCreate variable. So we're saying if we're updating this record and active does not equal yes, sorry, with active is being changed from no to yes. So we are calling a subflow in this scenario. So in this subflow, we are passing in a few variables, account ID, first name, and last name, and it's just creating a user just for demo purposes. These are supposed to be pretty simple. So in our subflow, we created 3 variables and we're making them available for input, which pretty much means that we can pass variables from that record triggered flow to our subflow. And here we're just creating a contact record. We are setting our 3 fields on our contact record, and we've added a fault path. So in this flow path, we're actually creating a record. We are setting the flow node, and the exception message. So it will tell us, hey, like this is breaking in create contact from user in the create contact record node, and this is our error. So just to demo this for you, we'll go back to our account, and first we will demo the error. So I already have a set industry. You can see that I have open opportunities. So if I change this, we should get an error. So I'll change this to hospitality. We'll save. And yes, so the flow is working. It threw our error. So let's go ahead and cancel out of that. And to demo the next two flows technically, so we're going to update the rating to hot. Active should be set to yes, and we should get that contact created on this account. So let's take a look if it worked. So active was set to yes. And we do have that new contact. So you can see, looking at the mod dates, 9/38. So yes, this was created a minute ago. And yeah, there you have it. So if you guys have any questions about flow best practices, when to use one flow or another, you could reference this video. Feel free to leave a comment with a question. I see these types of problems day to day, and I'm more than happy to help where I can. All right, thanks guys, and we'll see you next week.